So I'm Linda Carlson. I'm going to be the moderator for today's session. So I'd like to thank everybody who has joined us both in person and remotely. Today we'll hear from our speaker, after which time we'll open up the floor for discussion and any questions people might have. So throughout the talk you'll be on mute, but we'll can always type in questions or we'll open it up for questions afterwards. So now I'd like to introduce Dr. Lauren Walker, who's going to speak on Androgen Deprivation Therapy Educational Program for Men with Prostate Cancer. Dr. Walker is a registered psychologist in the province of Alberta and holds an academic appointment as an adjunct assistant professor in the Department of Oncology at the University of Calgary. She earned her PhD in clinical psychology in 2013, completed a clinical fellowship specializing in oncology and sexuality in 2015. Dr. Walker established the University of Calgary's Oncology Sexual Health Lab in 2015 and maintains an active research program. As a researcher, as a researcher and clinician, she has contributed over 26 publications to the scientific peer-reviewed literature about psychosocial and sexual adaptation to cancer treatments. She was recently recognized with the 2017 President's New Researcher Award from the Canadian Psychological Association and the 2016 Young Investigator Award for Excellence in Research from the Department of Oncology at the U of C. She holds a Rising Star Independent Investigator grant from Movember and Prostate Cancer Canada. Dr. Walker's passion is in developing resources that help cancer patients of all backgrounds adapt to changes in sexual health after undergoing treatment. So welcome, Dr. Walker. I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Linda. So I'm pleased to be able to present to you about a program of research that is a clinical research and has now advanced into a standard program that many of you may have heard of now across Canada. I recognize that this is a highly specialized topic within prostate cancer and even more specialized within the treatment of men who are going on hormone treatment or androgen deprivation. But what I'm hoping as well to share with you is about how this program model was implemented and how it actually could serve as a model for other types of programs. So I'm pleased to give you some more details as we go through about this program specifically, but I encourage you to be thinking about how it can be applicable to other areas of care as well. So just to briefly introduce, this is a picture of myself as well as the rest of my team members who have contributed to this research over the last decade. My colleagues, Dr. John Robinson and Dr. Richard Wassersug, worked with me to write a book that we'll talk to you about as the foundation of this program. And we've had different program assistants and coordinators over the years, including Eric Wabowo and Carly Sears. So the context for why men who are started on ADT may need some additional supportive care is that men are starting on this treatment far earlier than they used to. So androgen deprivation is a treatment which helps to control the growth of prostate cancer. And it used to be reserved for men who were at late stages of disease as a way of controlling their symptoms. We now know that PSA screening results in earlier detection of prostate cancer and now earlier identification of biochemical failure. So we see increasingly younger men started on androgen deprivation, and they remain on it for usually the rest of their lives. For some patients that we've had in our program, they may even be on this treatment for decades. Whereas it used to be used to control advanced symptoms of cancer, such as pain management, we would find that men were not all that concerned about the side effects of the treatment because this was really a way of controlling their cancer and advanced symptoms. But now we see that there's more long-term suffering, likely from the treatment side effects, and rather than specifically from the advanced symptoms of the disease. We also know that approximately half of all men will be treated with ADT at some point in their prostate cancer treatment trajectory. So there are a variety of contexts for why men start on ADT. As I mentioned already, the one at the bottom here is when the cancer has already metastasized. However, it is also used commonly as an adjuvant treatment to radiation therapy, whether that be external beam therapy or brachytherapy. And in this case, it's often short term, somewhere between 6 months and 2 years. And then the men would go off of ADT. We also know that men who experience what's called biochemical failure. So this is, they've had a previously potentially curative treatment, they've had surgery or radiation therapy, and then sometime after that treatment, it could be weeks, it could be years, their PSA starts to rise again. And in that case, many of these men are started on ADT. So there are different forms of ADT. Certainly we know of different chemical agents which are stopping the production of testosterone in the body. A term that our patients don't like but is technically correct is the term chemical castration. That can be done through the use of agonists or antagonists, and we're seeing more and more drugs coming out as well for different forms of ADT. We also know that outside of North America, that men may commonly experience surgical castration as a way of dropping their testosterone and controlling their prostate cancer. So about 10 years ago, we started to notice that many patients were seeking clinical support, help of the psychologist, to deal with some of the side effects of their treatment. They often reported being totally surprised that these side effects were associated with their treatment. So it led us to develop a working group. We had 28 different clinicians and researchers who got together to help identify what the needs of these patients were. We also formed a consensus statement and guidelines to help provide some recommendations for supporting patients and also their partners through the changes that are experienced with ADT. We documented the lower quality of life associated with many of these side effects. And in particular in this paper, we highlighted that often the partners of patients with prostate cancer report more distress than the patients themselves. So we really felt it important to make sure that the partners were also included in survivorship support. So with the research on ADT, we are finding that the list of side effects keeps getting longer. Every time we write a paper or publish an edition of our book, we find there's a bunch of new things that are in the literature that could perhaps be added. So I have a long list here of side effects. We were able to do a categorization of these side effects, and so they fit into 6 categories. So side effects such as bodily feminization, which include hot flashes, breast growth, and breast tenderness. Physical effects, including a loss of lean muscle mass, weight gain, usually in the form of fat, fatigue, body hair loss, and genital shrinkage. There are several increased medical risks as well, including osteoporosis, and of course, along with that, fracture risk, diabetes type 2, and cardiovascular disease. From a psychological perspective, we see patients reporting emotional lability or mood swings, depression. There are increased risks for memory changes and difficulties with attention, changes in a sense of the patient's sense of masculinity, and we're seeing some more research now that suggests that dementia might actually be an increased risk as well. From a relational perspective, many patients report having more strain in their relationships and a loss of intimacy, not just sexuality, but relational intimacy. And from a sexual perspective, of course, erectile dysfunction, a loss of libido, difficulties with orgasm, reduced sensitivity to sexual stimulation, and infertility. So a long list of potential changes that can happen from the treatment. And when we started out in this area, we wanted to document that patients might benefit from increased knowledge or preparation for their treatment. So we reported in this study on a list of side effects. And as you can see here, the list is not quite as long as the list that I just gave you. But again, this was about 7 or 8 years ago now. And what I want to highlight from this graph is that when we surveyed patients and their partners about if they were aware of treatment side effects, we found that a large proportion of 40% were unaware of many of these side effects. And so we thought, you know, lots of people know about hot flashes, maybe they know about some of the sexual implications, but in particular, some of those medical risks and psychological changes were particularly uninformed about. You might be interested to know that when we compared the men on ADT with their female partners, there were differences in their rates of knowledge about these particular side effects, with men being more likely to report those sexual changes, including erectile dysfunction and genital shrinkage, and women being more likely to report learning about emotional changes. So this led us to question, are the patients and their partners not hearing what their physicians or healthcare providers are telling them about, or are their physicians perhaps not telling them about all the side effects? So we did a second study where we surveyed the healthcare providers, urologists, and oncologists to ask them about what were they spending their time informing patients about. So this is the percentage of physicians who judged specific androgen deprivation therapy side effects as important to inform their patients about. So in the green bars, you'll see that this is a proportion of providers who are describing this as essential or important to mention. And in the blue, it was determined that it was not important to mention these side effects, or in fact, in the light blue, they may actively have avoided mention these side effects to their patients. So there's pretty good consensus with the items on the left, so osteoporosis, erectile dysfunction, hot flashes, etc. But when you get to the right-hand side of the graph, we were particularly concerned that in some cases, the split is 50-50, with some providers saying it's important and some providers saying it's not at all important. So again, some high endorsement and agreement, but some with great discrepancy. We also set out to see what the literature said about whether primary care physicians or non-specialist physicians had confidence or comfort in helping to manage some of the side effects of ADT. And in this particular paper, this is done out of Toronto, they surveyed 92 Canadian primary care physicians who were responsible for administering ADT at least annually. And 38% of those physicians said that they felt their knowledge of ADT side effects was inadequate. They felt they were uncomfortable counseling patients about ADT, and many of them felt that they were uninformed about the incidence of particular side effects. And the most surprising thing about this paper was that they expected their specialist colleagues to monitor the patient's ADT side effects. And then when we work with the specialists, we often hear the opposite, that they expect that their family providers, when these patients are discharged, should be monitoring those side effects. So it's kind of a dissolution of responsibility of managing the patient's needs. So our concern is that if patients and partners don't really know what to expect from treatment, they don't know what side effects are associated with ADT, that it would be difficult for them to manage those symptoms proactively. So we went forward with developing a supportive care resource for these men. We have piloted and tested it in a couple of different formats, and now in its current format, it does exist in both an online and an in-person class. The online class is available across Canada to patients regardless of where they live. The in-person class is located in a few particular sites, which I'll show you on a graph or on a map shortly. I would like to just briefly show you a quick video that describes a little bit about the program from the perspectives of the facilitators, the patients, and the healthcare providers. So I'm going to hope our technology and our Wi-Fi is sufficient to share the video, but please interrupt or let me know if it's better for me to just stop.
The ADT educational program helped me a lot by making me aware of what was coming up in my life. And they weren't things I was looking forward to. It allowed me to think about it and come up with ideas, plan strategies for dealing with it. And that has made me feel like I'm in control. I'm not in this.
The program really helped me understand how ADT treatment was going to affect me as a partner, but it also allowed me to know how I could support Harold in this.
The program is based on our book, which is endorsed by the Canadian Urological Association. It's a reliable source of accurate information, and it's based on the latest research.
Men and their partners do better if they learn how to manage their side effects and how to maintain the intimacy in their relationship.
I know.
Oh dear. All right. I guess you get a sense there. We were just about to hear from one of our radiation oncologists about how he felt that he doesn't have the time to address all these issues with his patients, and so he felt that all of them. I do believe Athena's sending out or already sent out the slides, so if you have interest in learning a little bit more, I do encourage you to check out some of the videos on our site. Sorry, I'm just
the treatment
start again on me.
Information like that is complex because it is more than just physical symptoms. There are also psychological effects, emotional effects, and I realized that it takes time for it to sink in, not connected to the education program.
I think overall it's a good thing that I started the program rather than just reading the program. Helped me a lot in preparing to address all these side effects.
So we do have a website. It's called lifeonadt.com. And these videos are posted there along with other videos directly from patients about how they're coping with some of the side effects. So this is part of the resources available to patients, but also part of the resources available to healthcare providers or administrators who might be considering offering this program at their center. So we do now offer the online educational class. It is a live facilitated webinar. We use the GoToMeeting platform. So you're all familiar with how that works. And we do have a presentation delivered and then time for question and answer. Our program is currently funded through an unrestricted educational grant provided by Astellas, one of the makers of one of the androgen deprivation therapy drugs. We have had support in the past from AbbVie, a different maker of one of the drugs, and we're actively working to get more pharma representatives to contribute to a consortium so that it's sponsored by many different different pharmaceutical companies. So essentially what's involved with the program is patients are expected to participate in a 1.5-hour professionally led class. They receive a free copy of our androgen deprivation therapy book, which I'll show you on the next slide. And in that class, they learn about the treatments of side effects, how to manage those side effects using evidence-based strategies. And also they are given some instruction in goal setting so that we can enhance their success with making lifestyle changes. We find that the group setting helps to normalize patients' experiences, and again, the additional resource as well of having access to Life on ADT, where we post summaries of recent medical literature through a blog, and also have the videos that introduce patients to other people who've experienced similar side effects. So the ADT book is the foundation for the program. In the class, we go over the content of the book in a brief and more manageable form. Essentially, it covers content including the different kinds of ADT drugs. Now, this is a moving target. Every single time a new paper comes out, we feel like the old introductory chapter has been outdated. So we've actually now produced a second edition of the book as well, in which that first chapter describing the ADT drugs has actually doubled in length. We cover what they might expect, how to monitor for the side effects, different management strategies for those side effects, as well as the motivational strategies from the motivational interviewing literature to help increase success with goals. So I mentioned that the book is endorsed by the Canadian Neurological Association and it's published by Springer. Our first edition is available in French, and we're hopeful that we might be able to offer the second one in French as well. So I want to give you an example of what some of the things are that the patients learn. So I gave you the long list of side effects, but I'm going to just walk you through some examples of what they learn about perhaps treating hot flashes as an example. So we would cover what a hot flash is, what it feels like, how long it lasts, when it's likely to occur into treatment. We cover some practical strategies, more lifestyle management. We cover some medication options, which are evidence-based, as well as abdominal breathing or paced respiration, which is shown to be effective in the menopause literature, and we're optimistic that it may also start to, some of the studies that are being conducted right now with men will show some promising results. We use even some cognitive behavioral strategies, and this exercise, which is working with some negative thoughts around hot flashes, is clearly articulated in the book. So that's an example, again, of some of the options, and then patients are presented with those options and encouraged to choose the options that feel that they think are the best fit for them, their lifestyle, and their values. So we cover that for all of the different types of side effects. So we also know, however, that simply providing information to patients about the side effects and ways to manage them is often not enough to promote behavioral change. So I'm not going to show this video, but it's just a 1-minute clip here from a healthcare provider who talks about how you can tell a patient they need to lose weight, but they're not going to be successful with that unless they're adequately supported with strategies to do so, and ongoing support and management. And so we thought that it was particularly important for us to incorporate the perspective of the patients, the providers, as well as the program facilitators when we were approaching organizations to see if they wanted to start to offer this program. So that's why we created those videos. And again, they're all available on the website. But what I wanted to do as well is introduce some of the rationale for how we designed the program. And this I find is particularly important when I'm speaking to populations of healthcare providers. When we're advising patients to change some of their unhealthy behaviors, we often work from a strategy of trying to persuade them or warning them of some of the negative consequences of their behavior in hope that that will motivate them to change. So this is a comic I often describe: what fits your busy schedule better, exercising 1 hour a day or being dead 24 hours a day? So kind of from that perspective of fear-based motivation. But in fact, if you have been exposed to motivational interviewing, we know that most people are actually quite ambivalent towards change, and persuasion doesn't do anything to resolve that ambivalence that they're experiencing. So we acknowledge that they actually have good reasons to keep doing the same behaviors that they're doing, and that they have perhaps some good reasons to change, but they're sort of stuck in the middle between that with their ambivalence. And the paradox is that when we apply external pressure and those reasons for why they should change or those negative consequences, that sometimes that actually can create some resistance to change in the patient. And so we use the perspective of motivational interviewing to inform some of the interventions and the style in which we teach this class. So we're helping to elicit internal motivators for patients to make those changes, to see the process of change as one of negotiation, where their provider is working with them and negotiating back and forth with them. And it also recognized that motivation is always fluctuating. So we always talk about this in our class too, that we may start out with great intentions to perhaps exercise more or change our dietary habits, but that some days we're not going to really feel like doing that. And so there's likely to be ups and downs in motivation. The other piece of this is that motivation is particularly formed in the context of the relationship with the healthcare provider. So we've used the motivational interviewing literature to inform our program. And there are several different activities or exercises that they're taught about in the class and that are used throughout the book. So I'm not going to spend much time going through these, but just to give you an idea of some of the foundation for what's behind the behavioral change mechanisms in this program. So we encourage them to complete a pros and cons exercise where they're examining pros and cons for making a change or also for staying the same and not changing. And these are all in the book with relevant examples for each chapter. We also use the SMART goals format. We create an action plan with them based on this format, encouraging them to write them down. We know that research literature supports that if somebody writes something down themselves, for example, when their next doctor appointment is, they're actually more likely to attend that appointment, having had written it down themselves than if somebody else wrote it down for them. We are also encouraging them to articulate why this is important to them, and that helps when that motivation is fluctuating. And we encourage them to plan for barriers that might get in the way and what they would do to address those barriers. So that was just an action plan based on the SMART goals. When we're sharing this program with healthcare providers, we also offer that there's a teachable moment when the patient is started on ADT. So we know that patients who are more involved in their treatment decision making are actually more active in managing their treatment. The problem with that is that when patients are started on ADT, they're typically told, you need to go on this treatment, there's no other options for you, this is what you have to do. And that doesn't promote a sense of the patient being actively involved in their decision making or taking ownership for their health. So we spent some time with our provincial tumor group in Alberta designing a script that would promote the active involvement of the patient in taking responsibility for their health. And so the script is also something that we provide to our healthcare providers to help promote that active involvement. So the program now has become a standard of care at several sites across the country. I do have a map that I'm going to show you where the program is and where we've expanded even in the years since our pilot grant to launch this program. So when we set out, we initially decided we would like to target 6 Canadian sites responsible for the treatment of prostate cancer patients. We wanted to include 1 francophone site, and we wanted to identify these sites, get administrator buy-in to be able to offer the program, to identify a facilitator at each of those sites who would be trained to offer the program. And we have a day-long training procedure for those facilitators. Our goals were to attain adequate enrollment to warrant monthly classes. So we decided that we would need at least 3 patients attending to make it worthwhile, and that we would, an ideal group would be around 8. And we would also encourage them to bring a loved one or partner with them to the class. And then our hope was that at the end of our grant funding, which was from 2014 to 2017 and was funded by Movember and Prostate Cancer Canada, that these programs would be sustainable and continue on regardless of the grant being over. So this is where we first started the program. So you'll see we have sites who implemented the program, including the Victoria Island Prostate Cancer Center, the Prostate Cancer Center in Vancouver, the Prostate Center in Calgary, the Princess Margaret Hospital in Toronto, and the Queenie II Sciences Center in Halifax. So we did successfully launch the program at these 5 sites, and we were not successful in getting the program launched in Montreal, which is where we were aiming. So during that period of our initial 3-year pilot, we had a sequential offering of these sites where we started in Vancouver in April and Calgary in April of 2014. And then we started to move sequentially to the other sites. So Victoria came on in February, Halifax and Toronto came on in September 2015. So we have fewer patients enrolled in the program because the program data collection started later. So this is just a quote from one of the patients who participated in the program, describing the difference between his surgery, radiotherapy, chemotherapy, and ADT, and how ADT actually was the more difficult one for him to deal with because it changed who he was and it changed his relationship with his wife. He described how no one seemed to understand that except the leader of the class, who he finally felt understood by and was relieved that there was some help and support for him. So when we asked patients to rate how satisfied they were with the program, our ratings were quite high, with over 70% reporting fully satisfied with the program, and that they would encourage other patients to attend the program. When we asked patients to set a particular goal for themselves before the program, before they left the class, we recorded what their goal was. And in the majority of cases, they set a goal to become more physically active. And we also encourage them to be very specific about that goal. So, how many times a week, what activity they were going to do, who they were going to do it with. Other goals included learning more about treatment side effects, engaging in nutritional changes or weight loss goals, and then some other, again, more broad goals. So we did evaluate some research findings looking at some preliminary outcomes, and we evaluated patients' sense of self-efficacy at being able to deal with those side effects. We also examined the bother that they were experiencing related to their side effects. The vast majority of participants who were enrolling in our program early on. So they had just started ADT, which means that we didn't actually expect that their side effect bother would decrease, because their side effects would only start when their ADT started. So just to kind of give you a little bit of background, we did use these categories to analyze our results that I did present in one of the earlier slides. We found an increase in self-efficacy from baseline to 2 months later for all 4 of these categories. However, we found greater self-efficacy for managing bodily feminization, physical and psychological changes than we did for sexual changes. And so we have been thinking that perhaps the sexual changes are something that are a lot more complicated to deal with, given just a list of strategies and options for them to try themselves. And then we did find that the bother associated with side effects was highest for those sexual changes. We also analyzed some of our couples findings and found that even if patients and partners were unable to improve their mood or change their mood, that in fact when partners understand patients' mood symptoms and what they're going through as a result of their ADT, that both patients and their partners report better dyadic adjustment and better intimacy. So the fact that they are more able to understand what their partner is going through, perhaps through some of the educational resources that they've participated in, or through better communication about those changes, that they do seem to do better as a couple. So we also were aiming not only to just determine if this program model was feasible in launching it across different sites in the country, but also whether or not the program was determined to be acceptable to the patients. So I did report the patient satisfaction ratings, and then we also asked them if they would recommend the class to others, and why or why not. And so some quotes here saying, definitely it gives you a better insight. Reading the book and hearing the information makes it helpful and understandable. You know what to expect. The class and the book is a must. Many topics I take for granted on a daily basis. And so giving some sense that they're starting to plan and track their achievements, and finding that the information that they gained was widely covering the different areas of ADT. So another study that we were able to publish from these results was actually the first study to document what patients are doing to manage some of their androgen deprivation side effects. So for example, the go-to for hot flashes tends to be medication management when patients are asking their physicians for support. But we found that only about 6% of the patients actually were interested in using some of the medications, and the vast majority preferred using some behavioral or lifestyle strategies, such as the deep breathing, or even practical strategies like layering clothing. So from this study, we were able to document what patients are doing and what they'd be willing to do if the side effects became bothersome for them. So this study was able to provide some recommendations to healthcare providers about what the patient's preferences are, and their willingness to use some of these strategies. So it's the first time we've seen something really documenting how patients are managing those side effects. So what I want to speak to now is just some background and some learnings around this current model of dissemination. So we sought funding through the Prostate Cancer Canada organization in Movember through their True North program. And that funding lasted from 2014 to 2017, after which they, as an organization, decided that they would not continue to fund or continue to offer the program. And so our goal was to see how we could create a sustainable program once that grant funding had ended. And so we worked to identify sites that would be willing to take the program on and continue to offer this program in-house, where they would cover the costs of the program. So what that would do is allow for the sustainability. It would become integrated as a part of their standard of care. And so in approaching them, we sought to seek sites that would identify potential facilitators who could be sent to be trained, and that they would be able to get their administrators on board with support for leave time to be able to receive that training. So with this program, there isn't a particular designation for the facilitator who offers the program. We have trained social workers, psychologists, registered nurses, and researchers to become facilitators of the class. In my experience, the ones that are the toughest to get the leave time to be able to come to be trained is the RNs, for them to be able to find coverage for their clinics, to be able to spend a day receiving their training. That has been a bit more of a barrier for us. So what's involved with becoming a facilitator is traveling to one of our 3 training sites. So those core sites I mentioned in the beginning, Vancouver, Toronto, Halifax, Calgary, were all where we had a co-investigator. So somebody on the grant who was able to be a facilitator and really champion this program in their sites. Since then, Vancouver's model has changed a little bit, and the person who is heading up that program is now no longer there. So our training sites include Toronto. Andrew Matthew is the person who does the training there. Halifax, Debbie McLeod is the person who does the training there. And then in Calgary, it's myself. So the potential facilitators traveled to one of these sites, received 1 day of training where they got an introduction to the ADT program and the research supporting it and the rationale for developing it. They got an introduction training to motivational interviewing, so about 2 hours in their basic theory behind motivational interviewing and some strategies. They were invited to observe a live ADT class where patients attended and participated, and they observed the question and answer period. And then they received some training in championing that program at their home site. So that would include things like how to get physician buy-in, generate referrals, how to advertise, how to make sure administrators are in support of the program, and that kind of thing. So now up to 2019, these are the sites that we've trained across Canada. Our goal was to have group-based classes every month at each of these sites, but in a few cases, the demand hasn't been high enough to offer groups. So in particular, I want to highlight Victoria, St. John's, and Rimouski, which is in Quebec, as being sites where they've moved to more of a one-on-one model. So they offer the same programming and support and deliver a book to each patient, but they get more of a one-on-one session than a group-based session. Sunnybrook is the same actually in Toronto. So Angela Turner is the one who's trained there, and she offers that one-on-one consultations with those patients. So our goal was to get this in as many places across Canada as possible so that the program's freely accessible to patients. We've now also trained Moffitt Cancer Center in Tampa Bay. We've got some interested folks in Boston at the Dana-Farber Institute. And so our next steps also include taking this internationally, not just US, but also we have someone who came from Australia to observe, and she's championing the program there, and folks as well in the Netherlands, the UK, and in Finland who are very keen and working to find funding to be able to offer this program there. So when we are approaching sites, we often encourage them to think about what some of the anticipated benefits are. So if you're listening to this presentation and you're thinking about offering this program at your site, these are some benefits that may be something you consider, or perhaps ADT is so far out of your scope of practice, but you're thinking about how can you take a program that you've created at your site and create a national offering of it. And so thinking about some of the benefits can be a helpful way of disseminating that program. So in our model, we find that there is less time spent teaching in that initial physician consultation, because they can refer them to this program where they know that the patients will get standardized education. We also anticipate that there would be less time in those follow-up visits dedicated to explaining side effects and introducing strategies, because many of these strategies patients actually can implement themselves and from a self-management perspective. We offer that this program provides better support for patients and also support for their partners, which is something quite unique about this program, and the feedback that we've heard from other funding organizations is that that's something they really like about it. And then also the potential for healthier patients at follow-up, because if they're doing more proactive things to reduce side effects and risks, this may reduce their medical risks and also offer for earlier identification of those side effects and better coping with those side effects that we know impede their quality of life. We do also consider what some of the barriers are to getting other sites to take up this program. And so there really does need to be team buy-in. So helping the providers at those sites see, is this a need for their patients, and how much time do they already spend teaching those patients? I would say perhaps naively, when we first got started, we thought, well, this is just a good resource, and I think, providers, if we tell them about it, would be happy to send their patients. But we had a difficult time getting those referrals, that stream of referrals going. And so we actually found that giving a series of in-services to the genitourinary tumor groups, the nursing groups, to be able to help educate them about the needs of the patients was absolutely pertinent before they would send any of their patients to the program. So thinking as well about the ongoing costs, so particularly the staff time to be able to facilitate the class, so that they would need 1.5 hours direct clinical time to be able to teach the class. There'd be some administrative organization as well when patients would register for the class, and then also the purchasing of the book. So we do give a book out to each participant of the class. When they're purchased in bulk, the book only costs $10. Sometimes we've had really good luck with pharma as well, being willing to provide those books. Also considering the recruitment process. So this is something we learned, that the distribution of the ADT drugs is different in each province. So in Alberta, we have a centralized pharmacy at our 2 tertiary cancer sites, where all of the ADT prescriptions are administered and delivered. And that is different in all the different provinces. So when we got to Halifax, we had more difficulty identifying who those patients on ADT were, because they pick up the prescription at their local drugstore, and then they take that to their provider to be administered via injection. So different processes in different provinces, and also demand. So in some of our larger centers, we don't have a problem getting enough patients per month to come to a group. For example, though, a city like St. John's or Victoria, there was much fewer patients who were in those city centers who were able to join the class, because there's just such a wider distribution of people across the province. And also to consider the host institution, whether that's something that's more sponsored by the urology center or the radiation oncology center. We've had some pretty good luck with our second wave of dissemination from 2017 to 2019, getting more buy-in from the radiation oncology center. So in the cancer center itself, rather than in urology, as urology is more private. In many of the provinces, it's more of a private fee structure. And if they have a prostate cancer center, which is often like a charitable organization that administers extra supportive resources to prostate patients, that those are really great resources and sites that tend to be quite keen on sponsoring these kinds of programs. So I just want to close. If you do have additional questions, both myself and my colleague, Richard Wassersug, are always available and happy to answer additional questions, particularly if you think that maybe your site might be interested in joining or offering the resource, or you have patients that you think you might want to refer to the online resource, or to contact me if you have insights or questions about how to kind of use this similar training model and dissemination model for maybe a different program that you've created. So just open it up to questions.